All right, so now I'd like to invite our first speaker, Erin Davis, to come forward and provide us with a bit of a history and introduction to co-design and research. Erin Davis is a research fellow in the Gender and Women's Health Unit and the Methods and Implementation Support and Clinical Health, or called MISH. Her expertise includes participatory research, qualitative methods, co-design implementation, and theory-based evaluation approaches. Her experience spans across 2 decades, working in policy and practice roles in government and community settings in Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Cara, and hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'm just going to share my screen now. Thank you. Great. All right, can we all see that? Okay, I can't see you, so I'm going to assume that you can. Someone let me know if you can. So I am going to spend a few minutes just giving you kind of an overview of co-design basics. So for some of you, this may be very familiar. For others, this might be new information. But yeah, I just wanted to spend a few minutes doing that. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions, but if we don't get to that, that's fine because I'll be on the panel later today. So maybe if you have a question for me, we can catch up later at that time. I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today, wherever we may be, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people who are joining us here today as well. So a little very short history of co-design. This will not cover everything, but just to give you an idea of where co-design might be situated, if you look in the literature, generally you see discussions of co-design being something that's been around for about 40 or 50 years, emerging from different interconnected movements and disciplines. I've just put up some dot points there, with kind of signifying those different movements. Many of you might be familiar with participatory action research or community-based research, or perhaps inclusive or universal design movements for disability justice. That may be familiar to you if you're working in the health space. Human-centered design, user-centered design, those sorts of ideas, often coming from industrial design movements or product design or business. And then, of course, there's self-determination approaches of many kinds that relate or interconnect with the concepts of co-design. And some might say that co-design has been around for a very long time, maybe as long as people have been around in a way, because people have survived and existed together through collaboration. We can tend to think of human existence as quite dreadfully combative and war and conquest and those sorts of things, which is definitely true, but we also collaborate and we work together and we make things together. And we've done that through art and science and social justice and also all sorts of movements over time. And so in a way, I like to remind myself that maybe doing co-design is something that is inherent to our human nature and our human relationality with each other. So just want to put that idea forth for you today. This map, I think, is kind of a useful tool for being able to understand where co-design is situated in relation to some of these other movements and these other disciplines. This map was adapted from the work of Liz Sanders, who is a pretty well-known academic and consultant in the co-design world, and has actually been quite influential in some of the tools that are used in co-design that help generate people's ideas. So, the different kinds of activities that you might use in co-design, like personas and journey mapping and that sort of thing. So you can see co-design is situated there in relation to, being led by design thinking and being led by people, working with people with lived experience or people who are also potentially going to implement the thing that's being designed. And you can see that it's, close to the ideas around participatory action research, which is also it tends to be quite people-led or consumer-led, but more on the research side of things. But of course, these things are also not very fixed and can overlap and intersect with each other as well. But just to give you an idea of where things might be positioned. Another way to understand co-design is where it's situated on really a spectrum. It's often depicted as a spectrum of consumer engagement or consumer involvement. This particular spectrum is fairly well known. You'll probably have seen it before. It comes from the International Association of Public Participation. And in this example, what this intends to convey is that co-design, as you move up this spectrum, is positioned much more in a space where people are leading the development or design of whatever it may be that you're creating. So it's moving up from consulting with people who are taking a collaborative approach and much more actively involved in the decision making and the creation of whatever it may be, an object, a process, a policy, an intervention of some kind. I also quite like how this defines co-design in its relationship to implementation and evaluation. Because co-design could sometimes be seen as just the doing and making of the thing. And we can forget that we can also involve people who've been doing co-design in the testing, in the implementation of the thing we've created and the evaluation of it as well. So I like to see co-design holistically in that way. And I think that's a great definition of it in that respect. So another way to look at co-design, of course, is what is coming together when we do co-design. I think what sets it apart perhaps from other types of deliberate participatory approaches is that it centers lived experience. I think this, pie depiction kind of helps us with that, but I think lived experience could be situated more centrally there as well. But what this intends to show you is that you can bring research evidence and practice experience together. Lived experience has often been the missing piece of the pie, in research or in design thinking. And, here's an opportunity really to put lived experience right back to where it belongs, and have things led by, with people who understand directly the issues that you're trying to address. And there are a lot of principles and concepts that are situated around that as well. And I've just named a few of them here. You may have others in your mind or others that you draw upon. So this is an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea of some of those key concepts and some that Richard had mentioned before as well. Taking all this together, sometimes co-design is discussed as something that has a mindset or mindsets. So there's principles and mindsets are often discussed in the co-design literature. So I think in a way, the mindset idea is something we embody when we do co-design, and we try to enact that as much as we can. So we are thinking about how we are participatory in our approaches and we're inclusive, that we're valuing lived experiences, that we care about people, we're showing care towards them in how we set up these projects, how we build relationships with people, how we look after each other when we're doing co-design work, particularly if we're addressing health and social care issues that are very challenging and very difficult for people to go through. That's their lived experience, is something that could be quite distressing. So we have to take a trauma-informed approach and really draw on our care ethics. And as Richard mentioned as well, we are constantly critiquing power. And that's a never-ending and very important reflective approach to take through co-design. And co-design is designing. We are creating something. We are making something together, and we're making decisions together about how things are going to be created and how they're going to end up and be tested and implemented. You probably already know this. It's probably already been discussed many times in your own work, but it's important just to acknowledge that sometimes co-design is taken as like a consultation or one-off event, but co-design is actually iterative. You need to engage with people many times when you're co-designing something. There are steps and processes that are important to look after, and not just kind of extracting information from people and then kind of going away with it, but to keep involved in designing, the thing that you're creating together. It's also it's not just qualitative research. It's not just a focus group. Qualitative research should inform co-design, and it's definitely, the methods are a part of co-design, but it's not only that, it's much more active. And, I think given some of the history stuff I talked about before, sometimes it's taken as a fad or trend, but it's actually something that has been around for quite some time. Probably also already known, but who should be involved in co-design. Of course, it's always people with a lived experience of the issues that you're working on together. But it can be very enriching to have people who are practitioners or implementers of some kind who are going to be involved in making it happen, whatever it is you create. Particularly if they are in that, direct role, that practitioner type of role. The collaboration between people with lived experience and people who are doing practitioner roles can be very exciting. And really builds kind of understanding of what can work practically for the things that you're creating together. And here are just some other ideas, often found in literature around other types of people or roles that could be involved in the co-design activity. I just want to point out this very common graphic that some co-design frameworks draw on. There are different types of co-design frameworks out there. Some people really draw on the principles and mindsets, and sometimes it's useful to use a methodology. There are many, so I won't get into all of them, but this double diamond idea is adapted a lot, and it's an interesting one because what it really points out is those steps and phases that people go through when they're co-designing something. And it also symbolizes the process around opening up ideas. So the arrows kind of moving upward, allowing all ideas to come out on the table, and then refining ideas and then opening up again as you're starting to get closer to what it is you want to create together, and then refining again towards making the thing that you're going to implement. So the idea of convergence and divergence is fairly common in those frameworks. I'm just going to point out some of the benefits of co-design. So again, co-design it's been used a lot, but it hasn't been evaluated a lot. So there's some emerging literature around the evaluation of co-designs, but some of the benefits are known, but I think we need more evaluation and testing of what those actually are. But these are some that have been pointed out. I think the idea of efficiently bringing research evidence, practice, wisdom, and lived experience together is probably one of the most important benefits of co-design. That collaborative work, that motivational work, that particularly when you involve professionals and practitioners in making the thing sustainable, something that's really going to work for people in the long term. And it can contribute to capacity strengthening for everyone. People are actively involved in creating something together. They can learn new skills together and gain new knowledge together. And I know I gain something every single time I'm involved in a project. There's also some challenges, of course, and many of you might be familiar with these if you've done, really participatory work or co-design work. It's very resource intensive, again, because it's not a consultation or a one-off event. It takes time to set up co-design. It takes time to build relationships, to find out from people how they want to do the work together. There are resources that are needed, of course, to remunerate people, to support people to get involved. It can be difficult to keep people engaged over time, particularly people who work in the consumer advocacy space are busy people. They're called upon a lot to contribute to all kinds of different projects. So we have to be very mindful of that. Power imbalance, of course, are ever present and need to be reflected on. And related to that, there is a risk that co-design projects can be not as inclusive as they hope to be, or consider the intersectional issues that people may be experiencing. So we need to be very critical and mindful of that and find ways to use our resources to support an equity approach. And it can be difficult to work with the uncertainty of co-design, particularly if you work in the research space and you have to really upfront, put your methodology and your plans into grant applications or ethics submissions and that sort of thing. there is a need to balance that with the uncertainty of, how things progress through co-design projects. I think just finally, I just want to leave you with some ideas around thinking about when you might be ready to do co-design. Thinking back on that spectrum I showed before, not everything has to be co-design, from the start. Sometimes co-design might be something you work toward. And I think it's also important to reflect on whether or not you and everyone involved, can put the time and the effort into doing co-design genuinely. So I'm going to leave that with you, some of those questions to reflect on, and I will just draw it to a close there. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Erin. Really appreciate that. I love what you said. Co-design is inherent to human nature. That's a great sentiment to start the day with. So yeah, I'm just going to now ask do we have any questions for Erin? If you do, would you like to raise your hand or pop questions in the chat, and we'll see how we go. I guess I have one question. I just wanted to ask you, how important is relationship building and trust in the process of co-design? And what does that mean? How do you actually, go about creating that?
Yeah, in many different ways. It really depends. It's critically important. You can't do it without good relationships and building trust. And sometimes that has to happen. It can't happen quickly because things need to get underway. You're bringing people together for the first time. Sometimes, if there are established relationships, particularly if you're working in a particular research space, if you're working on, digital health projects like you are, Cara, or, other types of health related projects, and you already know the consumer groups or the consumer advocacy organizations or people who are working in that world, building relationships with them before you start bringing research ideas in or finding out from them what they would like to do is really important. But you can also use activities, at the start of co-design to establish trusting relationships with people. So take the time at the beginning for people to get to know each other, the co-designers to know each other.